Hello, welcome to this week's episode of CXNext Live. Thank you for all of you out there that are joining us live for this week's episode. For first-time viewers, this is a weekly series we do helping CX practitioners out there get a better understanding of how they want to build their strategy, focus on the tactics, metrics they're going to use to go improve their customer experience, and also learn from real-world practitioners. We do this every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. And really great to have you here live, or for those of you watching after the fact, the recording, great to have you join us after the fact. Feel free to send us comments or questions. We'll be tracking those comments online so we can work to answer those. And also feel free to at anyone or mention anybody else of additional information that might be helpful or relevant. I'm really excited about this week's episode. We always love doing these live and in person. And Allison March, head of CX for John Hancock, will be joining me here live. So really excited to dig into that conversation. We're going to spend talking about how you build really great KPIs or metrics for delivering a better customer experience. That can often be a hard challenge. And I often say, like, what you measure is what you improve. And so how do you think about that in the complex world of customer experience, where you have brand and digital and marketing and sales organizations all kind of looking to deliver a better customer experience and managing all those stakeholders and aligning them. Before we dig into that topic, though, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the coronavirus. It's obviously a hot topic here at LogMeIn. It's all over the news. A couple of quick updates for all of you out there. One, if you haven't seen, LogMeIn is doing a broader effort around creating an emergency remote worker kit. You can find information on our website. We'll post a link to that. But we're offering a number of free services around our GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, Rescue Assist products, IT support products in Central and Pro, to help all of you enable remote work. For many organizations, this is probably the first time they're really thinking about having their entire team be remote. And that offers a lot of challenges, both in communications, in tools, in collaboration. So here at LogMeIn, we're really working to help all of you out there enable this remote work and really deal with this global pandemic. So feel free to look out for information on that. Another quick update for us as well is we were going to host our CXNext event here in Boston in May. And we've also decided to now make that virtual. So there'll be a bunch of information coming out about that event, but we'll be turning that event to be a 100% virtual event. And we'll give you some insights along the way as to how we're doing that, what we're learning along the way. Obviously, doing things like events virtually in a global fashion can be challenging. So we'll share some information about that, but look for some news about our CXNext event. And us taking that virtual in May. And then finally, next week, we'll be doing a full episode on the coronavirus and how you deliver really a great customer experience in a world where maybe your entire teams are remote and virtual. So we'll be digging into that. We'll be bringing some real world examples of stuff we're doing here at LogMeIn. We're a global company. We're in hundreds of countries. We have 25 global locations. Our contact center teams are globally located. So we'll bring some real world examples of what we're doing in response to the coronavirus and helping to support those teams. So look out for that episode next week, and we'll be spending an hour deep diving on that topic in addition to providing a lot of resources. So a lot of stuff on coronavirus. I'm sure it's on top of many of your minds. But on to more exciting news of what we're going to cover today, talking about the world of KPIs and CX. So I want to now introduce Allison March. Allison, welcome. Great to have you here.
It's great to have you be here.
We spent a lot of time talking and prepping for this session, and the world of KPIs and metrics is a super hot button. I think everybody can kind of relate to this. And so I want to start out and just talk a little bit about your role, because I think you bring a really unique perspective in the sense of you work for John Hancock, which is part of a larger parent company, and you're driving initiative across the entire organization.
So
let's start out and talk about kind of your role, how it sits in the organization, and now provide some context to KPIs.
Sure. So I work for John Hancock, which is owned by Manulife. Manulife is global, so we have a Canadian segment and an Asia segment, and then a global wealth asset management team. So I was trying to remember what the acronym stood for. So there's 4 different segments, and I sit in the U.S. segment. I report up to our CMO, so I sit in brand marketing, and I work with our different business units within the United States. So our retirement business, our insurance business, and our investments business. So it's kind of, I have essentially 3 clients that I'm working with. And then we have to take all of their CX efforts and do the best we can to standardize to the global approach and how we're doing this. CX and becoming customer obsessed is a huge initiative for our CEO, Roy Gorey. He has talked about it nonstop, that we are a customer obsessed culture company. He has promised that we're going to increase our net promoter scores by plus 30 over a course of 5 years.
That's great.
Very, believes in setting high goals. So when those goals are set, you kind of have to take a step back and be like, okay, how are we measuring them? Do we have the right tools in place? Is everybody kind of marching to the same order, because all of those scores get rolled up into a big number.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and what I like too, that I think probably many people can relate to, is even if they're in a small organization, there always are kind of competing interests, and where CX lies and lives and ownership of CX often varies.
Yeah.
And I think we have a similar structure here at LogMeIn, where we have 3 different BUs. We have a centralized brand and creative team, and then we have some centralized, for us, it's more teams. We don't have a pure CX role. We have teams that focus on that CX across all those different BUs, and then how we want to measure it through things like net promoter scores. And obviously our CEO as well is really focused on this and has kind of broader metrics for the organization, the entire company.
Right.
But I think balancing that between the needs of the BU and what they want and their metrics for success, and then aligning that with kind of top level metrics that are actually meaningful, I think is always a challenge.
It's competing too, because we have all these other goals too that include, efficiencies and cost reductions and kind of how does the CX world fit into that. And a lot of times it's seen as, hey, you're going to make us spend more money, not kind of thinking through that if we spend here, then we can save there. So it's a constant balance game.
Yes.
A game of tug of war, however you want to call it, but like some acronym there.
I agree. And I think too, one thing that's interesting about CX is, I think there's always, I feel like, general agreement that customer experience matters and net promoter scores matter. And there's kind of this like, we all buy into that.
Yeah.
But then to your point, it becomes a question of, okay, is that then, should we associate good CX with top line? And it's about growth and about driving new growth. Should we associate it with the bottom line of, if we have a better customer experience, but how do we do that while managing costs?
Right.
And I think while both are important, I think too often we use the term too vaguely, and then we're not saying, well, what is the real outcome we want? Is it that we want to increase customer lifetime value, or we want to retain our customers better, or like, what is the thing that we're trying to accomplish with CX?
Yeah.
That's maybe not just net promoter score, because that can also be a somewhat of a transactional data point.
So the question that we always talk about with my CX counterparts is always like, yes, we want to increase net promoter by plus 30, but why? And it's that why that's important.
Yes.
And even when you look at net promoter, it's not necessarily the scores that are important, but it's why they're giving you the scores.
Agreed.
So you kind of face the struggle of, reporting on the actual numbers, but then what are those important stories to tell as to why the numbers are the reasons that they are, and then what are we doing? How are we kind of acting upon that feedback? So it's kind of like a storytelling game with a dashboard.
Yeah, absolutely. And in last week's episode, we talked about kind of this, you have your current state, and then you have your kind of future state. Where do we want to go, and how are we going to measure success? But so much of it is that journey along the way, where, to your point, I hate to say like you can make data tell any story, but in some cases you can. So then it goes to your point of, all right, we want our NPS to be X. We want this improvement. But then as we're seeing those improvements, what do we think is driving it? And then let's play with those dials to say, all right, we're going to do more. Is it making it better? Or where we change those and now things aren't getting better? Right. So either that's diminished the value, or we don't actually know what's
going on. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we measure, we have a lot of different NPS metrics in place. So first of all, we are a KPI hungry company. I mean, it is, I think like the executive leadership team looks at like somewhere near 500 KPIs on a month. And so they're not living up to their names, right? There's too many of them to be key. So you're just, how do you balance that?
Yeah, that's good.
And then we also face the added struggle of kind of making sure that there's one source of truth and that everybody's kind of reporting on the same KPIs. So we've spent the last year of kind of getting to a place of, when do we release the numbers, if you will, and
frequency,
the frequency of them, how are we calculating them, who are they going to, like, all of that negotiation is, we've spent the maybe probably longer than that. I've been in the role for a year, so for the last year, and we've just nailed down a regular cadence last month.
Wow.
So,
and does that cadence vary by the metric, or is it like every I'm making this up, every Wednesday, all those 500 come out and get updated?
It's monthly B-Day, business day 10. So on the 10th business day.
And it's been
yesterday.
Somewhat nice. Is it somewhat backwards looking in the sense that it will be for the last month?
Yeah. So for our transactional, so it varies. So we have like a DFAB book that defines KPIs, the frequencies of KPIs.
Was it like a working group that created that, or how
yeah,
do you guys put that? Okay.
Yeah. So it's a global group, and it's called Definition, Frequency, Accountability. I forget what it stands for, but whatever. But
it's like
it's a big long thing.
I like that though. Yeah, I like that in the sense of because it's
the Bible,
and even to a metric, if you're not defining it well, can also be misleading.
Yeah, exactly. So it kind of takes everybody so that you know what you're looking at, you know when you're going to get those numbers, you know how they're calculated. So that kind of takes the question of the math out of it.
Yeah, which is good.
In a financial company, we get a lot of math questions, all the actuaries. So, so we just laid on that. And then so each KPI has a DFAB associated with it. So for our transactional NPS scores, we're looking a month in the rears. So we reported last month was not February, but January number. So yesterday we reported on January numbers.
Got it.
Because on a global level, TNPS is mostly like after call center calls or like in our global businesses, we have people kind of stop into shops and our storefronts and kind of do transactions that way. And
will they send them a follow-on email?
Either an email or in Asia, there's a lot of phone surveys. So mostly because of Asia and the phone surveys, it takes a while to get that data. And we look at all that data based on the interaction date. So even for us, we only do email surveys. But if somebody comes in on the 30th, they have 2 weeks, or somebody calls on the 30th, they have a week and a half to answer the survey. So we have to kind of close that out based on when on the 30th. So we have to give them time.
Yeah, so that runway after the month ends.
So we look a month in the rears for that one. Other ones are done on quarterly basis, but it's all kind of all on this one big dashboard.
And what does that dashboard live in? Is there like an online tool? Is it like Excel?
I think it's Excel. I actually haven't seen the dashboard.
Okay.
I just know when we have to give our numbers.
Yeah. Well, I always think it's interesting too of there's always this balance to me of over engineering.
Yeah.
We're going to build this amazing dashboard. And then
nobody uses it.
It's going to take a year to build it. And then after we build it, none of those KPIs matter anymore.
I know.
So I think it's always this balance of speed and giving people information to make better decisions. But you want to do it in a way that's consumable. Because if you make something that no one knows how to use, if it's overly complicated or it's in 10 different places, then it doesn't become actionable.
And you want to make it consumable, but the numbers are meaningless too, unless you don't know what's, the stories behind them or why something's peaking or.
And so that's my next question is, so I like the dashboard idea of you're trying to centralize it, you're trying to make it so that it's broadly accessible.
Yep.
But then how do you add that narrative or context to it? Do you guys do quarterly state of the business or go ahead.
It's monthly.
Okay.
So it's not a state of the business, but we have other things that as we report with that, it's kind of what's working, what's at risk. And just very simply, you kind of
and is that
tell a story.
And so will you do that by BU or do that for all of John Hancock?
I do it for the John Hancock. Overall, yeah, but you do it broken down by the metrics. So for if we're looking at relationship NPS scores, you kind of what's working, what's at risk, and kind of tell the stories there and how we're performing against our key competitors. For the TNPS, you kind of explain away the volatility
Yes.
of those
The noise
types
in the
of
system.
stores. Yeah.
Here's what we're actually seeing as a signal.
Exactly.
I know what we're doing to test.
Exactly.
Cool. That's great. I'll do a quick check-in here. So for those of you that just joined, this is CXNext Live. We're a weekly episode series. So whether you're watching this at home, on your commute, after the fact, we do a weekly series that talks about customer experience, opportunities to improve your customer experience, and real-world examples. Joining me this week is Allison March, head of CX at John Hancock. And we've just been spending some time talking about high-level KPIs, how John Hancock looks like that in a very diverse global organization, and then how you start to build things like dashboards and tools to make it actionable across your organization. One thing I know that we just recently did, we do a lot of NPS surveys, and we also invoice the customer. Yep. And we recently had a much longer survey. I think we had around 20 questions in a survey, and we recently just reduced that to 12, I think, or 13.
Yeah.
And we found actually the data was better as we reduced it. How do you guys go back and look at like the way you're doing surveys and the way you're doing, and once again try to simplify and streamline to make it better for the end user and make it better so you're getting better data?
Sure. Yeah. So that's a great question. When we do our surveys, we use Medallia as a platform for all our NPS work. And we look at things, we report, like I said, monthly to our different BUs, but we look at survey health ongoing and kind of look at drop-off rates where people kind of drop. And we're actually just going through this exercise with one of our BUs. It's hard. We have a couple of different audiences that we survey to. So we do our end customers, like an insurance policy holder or somebody who owns one of our 401ks. But then we also survey advisors and, plan sponsors for the retirement portfolios. But when you look at those B2B types of surveys, the response rates are terrible. It's so hard to kind of cut through and get that feel. And just
and the people are so busy.
They're so busy, and it's kind of how do you figure out what's in it for them? So we've gone through and we've really shortened our surveys. So I think and we want to kind of standardize across the business units. So we kind of have a sandwich approach with our surveys. So the bread is the same, if you will, and then the meat in the middle varies by BU. So so that we can compare.
Yeah, so you kind of have those bookends. These are the things we want consistent. Yeah. But then based on that BU's needs and response rates, and we can then adjust what's in the middle. I like that.
Yeah. So we've just moved to that, but now we moved to that approach. We've shortened surveys dramatically. We went from 22 down to 11 for about half of our surveys. And we're still not seeing the uptick in response rates. So we're now playing with it again, and we're looking at things like, every month we test something else, just to kind of compare. So we're looking at subject lines, personalization, doing a warm the door, kind of having the relationship manager say, hey, you're going to get a survey, please respond. Doing a lot of those different tactics. And then at the same time, we're also looking into saying, hey, we're doing this in an effort, kind of you spoke, we listened type of thing for a lot of our communications. But when
it's like getting buy-in from that audience. So that's not just like, hey, we're doing this for our own benefit, but by the way,
this will help you.
Exactly. And we heard you saying you want something, and here's what we're doing.
Yeah. So it's kind of closing the loop. But we are also looking at drop-off rates. What questions are people dropping off at? We're doing the key driver analysis. Which questions are kind of getting us the same type of responses, are kind of asking the same things, just in a slightly different way. So we're looking at that question by question, and it's kind of like an ongoing exercise. That it's kind of always happening.
That's great.
And evolving.
I like it in that way of looking at it kind of as a continuous improvement and kind of multi-directional. Both in the sense of length, question phrasing, pre-work, post-work, what all the things, you have an arsenal of things you can do.
Right.
And so now how do you test those in a way that's going to help one BU, but then for you can take those learnings and make them macro.
Exactly.
And how, so in the broader organization outside of John Hancock, how do you sync with those peers that are CX leaders in other parts of the business?
So we meet, on a bi-weekly, twice a month. We have virtual meetings where we kind of share state of the states. We have a lot of just email communications, kind of sharing back and forth what we're doing, what we're not doing, what's working, what's not working type of stuff.
Yes.
And then we've established a CX Center of Excellence that we like a resource that we can all tap into, so that we all like, if you need to do a quick roadshow on how to explain NPS, what like those we have that resources. Like that's great library.
And how much does that then group interact with the executive team? Do you have like some cadence where that either COE or
so the COE is the kind of the direct link to the executive team. So they're constantly working with, we have a global head of marketing who owns CX.
Yep.
So they're constantly, we're constantly interacting with them to kind of give her the nuggets to then share.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's really great.
Yeah.
And that's also outside of just like the dashboards and everything else.
It's the stories, I think, like.
So that was my next transition, actually. So finish your thought.
Yeah. So I think the struggle with NPS is and we're seeing this so much, is that because we're a financial services company, numbers are super important. And people are so focused on the numbers, but that's not really the point of collecting customer feedback. It's kind of it's identifying what those pain points are, and then what did you do to fix them?
Yes.
And then what happened? And then what happened? So it's not necessarily the scores. You're always going to see kind of fluctuations in that. It's never going to be a stable score, and actually it has a ceiling, so it can't go higher than a certain level. So it's building those collections of stories as like, hey, we heard this, we're doing this, and then you know what, we may not see an impact in our CX number, but we see a decrease in our NPS number. We see a decrease in call volume. We see an improvement in, pushing people to self-service or things like that.
Yes.
So we're actively trying to push those stories more so.
Agree. And I like too, there's a thing called system dynamics model. And it's like there's multiple things that can happen in the system.
Yeah.
And to your point, we may say, hey, we're going to do this, and we know that NPS isn't going to change. But to your point, there's going to be big cost savings out of it, or there's going to be a better customer experience of lower, higher response rate, or less wait time, or whatever else.
Yeah.
And I think it's nice to be able to have that narrative.
Yep.
But then to your point, still drive it back to a data point. So it's not like, hey, everything's better, and they're like, well, why?
Right.
You're like, well, because this is why we're seeing reduced volume on our contact center, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And so I really like that.
Yeah.
Are there other ways? So I think if you were to ask people, if you were to walk around here and ask people, like, does customer experience matter? People would say, yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. But if you were to say, okay, tell me an example of how we've improved our customer experience, that can be hard.
Right.
So how do you guys, outside of like the leadership team and dashboards and metrics, are there other things you do to try to like build a culture of customer experience and share and celebrate those wins?
Totally. So there's a couple of things that we're doing. So we, in our call centers where we're collecting NPS data regularly, our reps huddle up twice a week to talk about the feedback. And then,
that's great.
And then they make any kind of iterative changes that they can make to improve that experience. So for example, and this seems like sort of like a no-duh, but it's, in the swirl of real life, it kind of gets lost. But we were getting a lot of complaints about hold music. It's annoying. We hate it. And so we gave a silent option, and that helped kind of improve the experience.
Well, and what's interesting about that too and funny is that like your folks in the contact center don't control that. Like that's not their, like they didn't pick the music. But then they're like, at the end of the day, like if the experience is terrible, they get dinged for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really great example of where, once again, the system's complex.
Yeah.
And how do you find things that will make everybody's life better?
Right. And we want to focus in on like a lot of low tech kind of process things that you can kind of change. So like so we have the reps huddling up, and they'll identify issues that they can't solve, that are bigger than, what happens in a call center.
Yes.
And so then once a month, we have what we call an outer loop, and it's of senior leaders that are cross-functional, that the CSRs, they kind of punt up an issue to that outer loop that we talk about and we solve for in that meeting. So we typically start an outer loop meeting with a couple of calls from customers. So you can hear their frustration, you can kind of hear it in their own words, what the problems are. And then we say, here's the issue. Here's the impact on the business. how do we fix it?
Yes.
So how do we solve for it? And then we'll provide other things like this is what some competitors are doing. This is some recommendations and things like that. So tax season is coming up, right?
Yep.
So forms are on everyone's minds,
Yep.
right? So one of the things that we have when you look at our in our insurance business, our claims forms, we have we require people to submit a W-9 form.
Yep.
Which is a document from the IRS. It's 6 pages long. That's in addition to all the other forms that we have. It was like a federal law that we had to start requiring this.
Yes.
What our competitors are doing is they're just simply putting language, W-9 language on their other forms and having people kind of sign it away. So the W-9 form was accounting for about 25 to 30% of not in good order claims forms.
Wow.
So if you have like a claim that is just kind of sitting there, we have to pay death and trust on that at like the longer it kind of sits. And if it's not in good order, it's kind of people are like, where's my money? What's happening here? Yeah. So we had started to implement that replacement language on our forms and like kind of signing it off. And it, senior leadership was like, yes, let's do that. All our forms have to be refiled with 50 different states. So like, there's all of these complications. So you identify like a CX fix and you're like, yes, this is the right thing to do, but it just takes time to get us there. So we've made that decision. We've done that work. And now we're just going to watch those. Hopefully
see what happens.
Yeah.
Well, and what I like that you talked about, two things I really love is there's a term they use at Amazon of like 2 pizza teams.
Yeah.
And like you should only have teams work on stuff that could eat 2 pizzas. Like if you have more people than would eat 2 pizzas, you have too many people in the room. And why I like the way you talked about is you're empowering the frontline folks to get that real-time feedback. And like they're saying, hey, here's what's working, here's what's not. Let's as a group go and improve that. But it's kind of micro to the sense of that team and they feel empowered. But separately, you're then having these kind of what I call like a tiger team that are experts and cross-functional and can look across the business. When they can say, okay, how do we change the way we work versus just trying to micro improve the day to day?
Right.
But you're not like saying to the whole contact center, everybody, we're gonna try this out. And then everyone's confused and not sure what to do. So it's this nice balance of where you're bringing the experts and giving them the freedom to go test and innovate and really disrupt. But at the same time, you're allowing your smaller teams to also make day-to-day changes that are within guardrails, but allow them to feel empowered and improve the customer experience. And provide that feedback loop, like you said.
And then we've done actual surveys of like before these loops were in place and then kind of while they're happening, just to gauge kind of the impact it has on the teams. I mean, we've seen like dramatic lifts and like I feel empowered to improve the experience. They trust my opinion. So those are really great things to hear. And then when you like sit in the room, people get so excited and passionate about it. It's just really like fun to be part of.
Because they can see and feel the change they can implement, and that's great.
And it's like they have a voice, right? So they're like, you're gonna tell Marianne this? Go for it.
Totally. That's great.
We'll
do a quick check-in. So for those of you that joined recently, this is CXNext Live, a weekly episode series focused on customer experience. We talk about strategy, real-world examples, things you can take back to your desks and implement. So for those of you watching from home, at work, in your commute, welcome. Glad to have you here. This week's episode is with Allison March. Allison is the head of CX at John Hancock, and we're talking about the world of KPIs and building really good business metrics. We started the conversation around kind of high level, how do you build organizational structure around KPIs? How do you build dashboards to report them? We've been talking now about how you drive the decision-making and empowerment down to your frontline employees, but also give opportunities to drive bigger, broader improvements. So really kind of balancing that, activating everyone, but also driving big change. One other question I have for you is from a frontline perspective, how have you looked at changing metrics for your frontline employees? So like a person in a contact center or a person in a branch. So for someone that is kind of day-to-day interacting with that customer, what metrics maybe were you using for them? Like how do they measure themselves? And then has that changed at all over time, over the last year?
So there are all the standard service level metrics that we still have in place.
And do they see them? Like how much does an agent see some of those metrics?
It varies by group.
It does. Okay.
It varies by group. So So, we have some teams that are like all of those metrics are on a board and they daily change them and they just kind of work towards them. And then other teams, it's kind of like, just the manager level sees it.
And is that like a cultural thing, what the work they're doing?
It's a cultural thing. So what we're going to be moving towards, and we're still kind of working the kinks out, is where the front line will be able to see all of their customer feedback.
Oh, wow.
And see their kind of TMPS score, like their scores, and all the verbatims and kind of all of that type of stuff, the little smiley faces kind of that they'll get per day. We're still a little ways off from doing that. But that's kind of the ultimate goal.
That's a big change.
It would be a big change. There's some foundational things that we still have to work out. I mean, we're a 150-year-old company, so we don't have email addresses for a lot of our customers. So, at that very level, like, how do we kind of, if we're only doing email surveys, how do we kind of
make it work?
So that's kind of like things that we're working on.
Well, and I think it's interesting too is there's this plus and minus to it. Once you go back to your point, when employees feel empowered, that's great. They're super energized. But at the same time, if like the North American team is like shouting and saying, "Oh, everyone loves us," and that's great scores, and then another team is like, "Well, our customers can't even do this survey."
Right.
It's like the upside of you want people to be energized, but the downside of how do you message it? How do you make it feel like everyone has an even playing field?
Right. That it's not, you're not gaming this. And then you've got to be careful for gaming this system too.
Yes.
So, there's things that we're still kind of working out in certain spots. Yeah.
And is that how do you guys think about that from like an in branch perspective of
Yeah, in the US we don't have branches.
Okay.
So I don't.
All right. That's fair. Okay. I couldn't have been sure if you had any kind of like branch.
I know. Yeah. We don't. I mean, we're just like over the past couple of years in the US, it's really where we've kind of put a focus in on our end customers, right? So we've primarily been focused on that B2B audience.
Got it.
Like life insurance is, you sell the product and then you forget about it. I mean, the policyholder never actually experiences the benefit of it.
Yeah, agreed. Yes, just the work setting it up. Totally.
Yeah,
that's great.
It's like a complete cultural shift to start thinking about those end customers and why they're important.
Agreed. And so much too. A big conversation we have and that we talk a lot in this series is that I think there's this continued realization. So much of conversations around marketing and sales is about net new. It's like always, who are we going to acquire next? Who are we going to go close? But I think one thing that the world of SaaS has taught us is that customer lifetime value is so critical.
Right.
And when you have someone, you built a relationship with them, to your point, they know your brand, they trust you, they're going to be more willing to buy something else from you.
Right.
And in your world where you're offering, your company's grown and you can do acquisition and you're part of a bigger organization, how are you building that relationship with someone who had a transaction with you, hopefully liked the transaction, but then isn't going to really have a reason to interact with you again ever potentially.
Right.
So how do you look at that person as it's a relationship and the relationship's valuable?
Right.
And how do we make every experience better and better so they want to come back to us for more?
Yeah. So it's a challenge. So, one is kind of getting yourself organized and making sure that you have that data across all business units so you can kind of identify that
the opportunity.
Yeah. So that's something that we're still working through and kind of figuring it out. I mean, again, we're an older company, so all of those legacy systems, and there are so many of them,
I'm sure.
make that a bit of a challenge.
And you're in financial services, so you're regulated.
Exactly. But there are other products that we've started to sell. Our John Hancock Vitality life insurance is something that we've been selling for about 5 years now, and it is essentially a life insurance product that's tied to a wellness program. So, the more steps you walk, the more points you get. The more points you get, you earn a series of rewards that could be things like gift cards or reduction in your monthly bill or premium. So it kind of creates a living benefit for life insurance, which is a product that really only benefited.
Yeah, not the person.
Not the person who owns it. So it's kind of changed the way that we're looking at it, and kind of building those relationships with existing customers is becoming more and more important. And, we had to figure out how to talk to them, how to engage them, how to kind of keep that ongoing relationship and make a relationship as opposed to a transaction.
Yeah, I agree. And at the end of the day, like, this is another thing that's interesting is the value you're creating is about like them living a better life, and their kids or their beneficiaries to live a better life.
And it benefits everyone.
Exactly right. So it's like you're moving from a transactional conversation to like a win-win.
Yeah.
Everyone's trying to get more value out of this.
Yeah.
And then for you guys, then you're building that longer term relationship, and then CX metrics even become more important.
Exactly.
Because it's not just about that one-time transaction.
Right. Exactly. So we're looking at things like that. And then with our B2B audience too, we're looking at taking like our detractors and looking at them and saying, how much business, and tying it to like real numbers, like how much business has this cost us? And kind of what are some of those indicators that will help us kind of look at when an account or something is in jeopardy, what can we do and how can we plan for it?
Yes.
And so kind of not just looking at the numbers as, oh, this is our score, but like, yikes, something could be going on here. Let's get ahead of it. Let's be more proactive. Let's like build more, kind of take what they're saying and help improve that relationship.
That's great.
Yeah. So it's challenging in that we have to connect a lot of dots.
Yeah, sure. Well, and to your point, it's also like a multivariable equation in the sense of it's like, before they're a customer, their process of becoming a customer, and then their whole process after becoming a customer, and both for wins and losses.
Correct.
And lots of good information, but then it goes back to like prioritization and focus and where do we want to spend our time, and then building the ROI around it.
Yeah. But it gives you all of this feedback collection and those numbers, I think to what you were saying earlier, gives you a leg to stand on, right? So it helps you when leaders are making those strategic decisions as do we put money in this bucket or this bucket? And you're kind of like, well, here's all the information you have, and the customer experience is something that we haven't considered before, and it should be as equally important as a couple of those other legs.
I totally agree.
Yeah,
I totally agree.
So,
and I think it's important too. One thing I found is that, in organizations, whether you're in a true CX role or you're like a part of a CX team, is everybody kind of uses different ways to talk about the same thing. Mm-hmm. So finance has their own language, and sales and marketing. And so I think another important thing for CX is we have kind of some of our own language of NPS and things like that, but also how do we turn it into metrics other parts of the organization can really understand?
Yeah, and I think that's critical to get those other people bought into it.
Exactly right. And that's why you have 500.
Because
sometimes too, it's like these 10 are really important to us.
Yes.
But then these other 490 are really important to other parts of the organization. And they can say, oh, I see how I'm connecting my data point to your data point.
Right.
And I see my data points going in the right direction or holding steady or whatever, you're looking for it to do.
Yeah.
So I think that also, it's almost like you need a little decoder ring to say like, how do you take CX language and turn it into something that finance or sales or whatever else can understand.
Operations.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Yeah.
The last thing I was, for you as a CX professional, you talked about, some nice work you guys are doing internally around like Tiger teams and, groups to kind of drive better best practices. How do you externally, as a CX professional, like where do you go for information around KPIs? And do you have like a network of folks? Do you find conferences are helpful? Like, how do you keep yourself sharp on these areas outside the work, your day-to-day work?
Yeah, so I kind of grew up in the customer insights world, so tap into a lot of that network, but then always looking for conferences and then opportunities just at the conferences to talk to other people who have been and done this type of work before and just kind of, beg, borrow, and steal from what they've done.
Agreed.
So.
Yeah, I kind of call it like it's like a sports reference because they're always fun. It's like the All-Star game.
Yeah.
It's like you go and you're like talking to other like, what'd you do here? And what about this? How do you practice that? And it's like nice ways to learn from those other experts.
And it's also, it makes you feel a little bit better. Like they're like, oh we're in that same boat. And you're like, oh, thank God.
Exactly. Yeah, it does. I think it gives you those ahas of ways to break through, but also those like, well, we're all struggling with this, and hopefully
I'm not alone.
Yeah, exactly. Commiserating.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you so much for the time. I really enjoyed our conversation today, and I think we've had touched on a lot of really good insights for everybody out there in the world of customer experience and building KPIs.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And so for those of you out there, we really appreciate the time with us today. For those of you that ask questions, we'll make sure we follow up on those. We'll post a blog summarizing a lot of these topics with some links to some other articles that are interesting. Once again, I think there's a great opportunity, as Allison's talked about, of building kind of an overall focus on key metrics for your organization around CX, how you take that from an executive level down to your frontline employees. So hopefully there's some good insights you can take back to your day-to-day work on improving how you measure and improve your business and customer experience. As a final point, once again, we'll be doing a lot more coverage around the coronavirus, the impact of CX, the impact to your organizations, how you enable remote work. We'll be doing a full episode of that next week. So feel free to please check in on that and posting a number of blog posts as well. We know many of you are struggling with this challenge, so we're looking here at LogMeIn to help and provide more assistance. So thanks so much for joining, and look forward to talking to you more next week. Until then, take care. Thank you.